Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Inner West Council. Thank you all for attending tonight. And I will start by acknowledging that we are meeting on the land of the Gadigal and Wangal people of the Eora Nation and acknowledge elders past and present. I do want to make people aware that we are live streaming tonight's council meeting in conformity with council's decision to open up council meetings, allow more people to participate and make council meetings transparent. Camera is focused on the front of the chamber, so on me and my colleagues sitting up here, not on speakers or the public. However, by speaking at a council meeting, members of the public do agree to being sound recorded and must ensure their speech to council is respectful and uses appropriate language. A person who uses defamatory, discriminatory or offensive language may be exposed to liability, for which council takes no responsibility. Any part of the meeting held in closed session will not be streamed, but will be recorded for the purpose of verifying the accuracy of the minutes. Okay, in terms of declarations of interest, I declare I have no declaration of interest in any matter listed on the business paper. I do move and declare carried the minutes of the last council meeting, which was held on the 28th of February. And I will bring also to people's attention that the meeting is governed by the Code of Meeting Practice of the former Leichhardt Council. There are a number of administrators' minutes tonight. Well, there are 2 administrators' minutes tonight, but there is one at item 15, and there's a late administrator's minute, which is item 17, which relates to council's announcement today of a study into a new public transport system for Parramatta Road, which we think has exciting prospects of delivering the kind of renewal that the state government wants on Parramatta Road, but for which they haven't committed an appropriate public transport infrastructure. That's an item that will be dealt with as item 17. Otherwise, I'm going to go through the agenda in the order that it's listed. And I will also make the point that the council actively encourages open council meetings where members of the public can speak for up to 3 minutes on items listed on the agenda. We do have a voluntary pre-registration system in place for tonight's meeting, and quite a number of people have registered, so they will get priority in speaking order. However, I will then ask people in the gallery who may also want to speak on an item but who haven't registered if they want to speak, and you are also then welcome to speak. That's probably all I need to say by way of introductory comments. So we'll turn to item 1 on the agenda, which is an officer's report on WestConnex Stage 1, which relates to the Ashfield-Haberfield part of our local government area, and specifically in relation to a council submission on the urban design and landscape plan. Now, I have, I'm sure, got, well, I'm not sure I have got any pre-registered speakers for that item. I did have one, but that has been crossed off. So I'll call the name anyway, which is Alejandro Avello. Yeah, okay, thanks, Alessandro. And so now open it to other people who want to speak, and I've got Alex Loss. Yeah, it's working. Does anybody else want to speak on this item? No. Sorry. Yes, sir. And if you could just please give your name and suburb, that would be appreciated.
This is about pollution. And I think that people are not taking pollution seriously enough. The current pollution in Sydney is equivalent to smoking, and this is your children as well. Your children are smoking 1 cigarette a day, every day. 365 cigarettes a year they smoke, as you do, as I do, and everybody else who lives here. The air pollution in Australia contributes more than double the national road toll death each year. Health costs of particular pollution in Greater Sydney, Greater Sydney metropolitan area are $4.7 billion a year. And what are these small particulates? These are the small particulates that seem to be completely missing from being of any importance. The smallest particulates are 2.5 microns in size, and there are some that are even smaller than that. To give you some idea, 40 of these microns add up to the thickness of a human hair, and they're the most dangerous particulates in pollution. And why? Because, in fact, they are small enough to go through the lung walls and enter the bloodstream and then hence all over the body. Motor vehicles account for 14% of this particulate pollution of 2.5 microns and less. And these are the very dangerous small ones, as I've just pointed out. These particulates are considered Group 1 carcinogens.
Richard, would you like another minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Other highly dangerous carcinogens in this group include asbestos, tobacco smoke, benzene, and diesel exhaust. I could give you a lot of other contributive factors about the health costs and this sort of stuff. The 2 points that I would actually make is that unfortunately 92% of the world's population are breathing polluted air. There's only 8% of people in the world who are not breathing polluted air. And in case it's considered not to be a terribly important issue, and this is a quote by Arnie Schwarzenegger that I came across. I'm not a great fan of Arnie's, but there you go. 7 million people die every year worldwide because of polluted-related illnesses. It's more than all the car accidents. It's more than all the suicides and the murders. It's more than all the people killed in the wars around the world. It's more than all of those things together. So to have this smokestack that we're seriously considering having in Haberfield and in these other areas is just totally unacceptable.
Thanks. Would anybody else like to speak? John?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, unelected administrator. Tonight, I'd like to discuss the proposal for the erection of a structure opposite the Bunnings Warehouse on the intersection of Parramatta Road and the West Link. First, kudos to the council staff for the perseverance in attempting to disguise a structure that will not only be an abomination on the eye, but a total disaster to our community. These efforts are in keeping, of course, with the unelected administrator's approach to WestConnex, which is make some noise to appease the community, but not too much to upset the people who appointed him, and above all, do not impede progress and manage the impacts somewhat. Ladies and gentlemen, there is an artist's impression of the structure in the council papers. And I hasten to add that you'll note that the artist's impression is actually shown in a semi-transparent form to hide the visual impact, obviously. But no Photoshop magic can hide the fact that we are talking about a 26-metre high structure, which equates, ladies and gentlemen, to approximately 8 to 10 stories high. Nonetheless, Council has diligently made several proposals, such as using particular types of brick patterns to better align the aesthetics to the surrounding heritage area of Haverfield. Hooray. It has also suggested that we plant various trees and shrubs around the perimeter to hide the bulkness. Way to go. The whole process, as I said, is the style of the unelected administrator, concerned about a fruitless beautification program instead of trying to actually address the issue here, which was touched on by the previous speaker. The issue is we have an emission stack, 26 metres high, 8 to 10 stories, unfiltered. Now, the Sydney Motor Corporation's marketing department has said that we shouldn't be alarmed because the emissions will magically dissipate in the surrounding environment. Magically dissipate. It's obviously the same marketing department that told us that 60,000 cars coming out onto Sydney Park will magically dissipate into the surrounding suburbs. Well, let's have a think about this. We have a very congested road, West Link. Putting a freeway onto that road is sheer stupidity, but do you not think that if we have a congested road and the emissions of that congested road are in that environment already, that putting additional emissions in the vicinity of that congested road, no matter how many magic wands you wave over it, are gonna increase the emissions? I'd like another minute. Further, if you actually expand a little bit out from that emission stack, you will notice that there are nursing homes, there are schools in its vicinities. Do you not think it is much more fruitful for you to go forth and talk about the pollution rather than the shrubs and the brickwork patterns? Seriously, you have 5 months left. What will you be remembered by? I really do not know. I do have a nice shiny new bin with your council logo on it. Thank you very much. But perhaps we should give some recognition to your efforts for the last 18 months. I recommend that we put a plaque on this emission stack. Let us call it the Richard Pearson Memorial Emission Stack. And under that, we can actually say, like our unelected administrator's favourite saying, I have no power to stop WestConnex. However, I can mitigate the impacts. I recommend you do not breathe in a vicinity of 20 kilometres of this smokestack, perhaps further if you have unfavourable prevailing winds.
Does anybody else want to speak on this item? I'm going to ask Simon Minoski, the officer, the group manager responsible for this report, if he would like to make any comments.
Through you, Mr. Administrator. Look, we are aware of the pollution impacts. We are aware of the seriousness of the small particulate matter and how these will be managed. And we have made previous submissions, and this will be an ongoing issue as WestConnex moves forward, and will continue to make comments in relation to those. The comments that were just made by the last gentleman, they're not the artist's impression prepared by council officers. They have been taken from the reports from the urban design and landscape plan prepared by the state government. We put them in there just to at least show what's being identified or proposed in those reports. This report has been limited to providing comments on the proposed design. We don't think they've got it right. We have asked for a number of different things to be re-looked at and reconsidered, including its design, including its materials that are used, to as best as possible try and improve its look, but also to take into consideration the seriousness in terms of its compatibility with the heritage areas surrounding it.
Could you address the issue?
Yes, please.
The bloke made a good presentation. He's concerned about it, and you just sit there and make no comment worthwhile.
No. My comment was around, we also think they need to go back and re-look at the design and how they're proposing that. This is limited to the design of the stack, the wall, and the landscaping around it. We think they haven't got it right in the report, and the submission will make it very clear that we think we as council officers don't think they got it right. We're asking them to go back to reconsider what they're proposing, and we're happy to work with them in terms of something that's more palatable.
So I'll make a comment.
You said you're aware.
I'll make a comment. Sorry, thanks. Order, please. You've had your turn. We're responding to the comments you've made. So, have you heard me speak? I haven't had an opportunity yet, have I? So, if you just bear with me. We're at a stage in the process here where the council opposed this particular aspect of WestConnex. We opposed the tunnel itself. We opposed the stack that goes with the tunnel itself. State government, they have legal powers to approve major state infrastructure. They approved this project. They approved it with a smokestack in this location. So we're now in a position of having to deal with a different stage of the development, and that is where they have legally approved it. You'll recall that council, this council, Inner West Council, not Ashfield Council, not Leichhardt Council, not Marrickville Council, sought legal advice about whether we could challenge the WestConnex approvals. We've sought two legal advices. In fact, we've got a third one which has just come in. They come back resoundingly with the same view. The state legislation is so strong that you don't have legal grounds for challenge. But what I'm trying to tell you, sir, and you had your opportunity to speak, and you didn't. So I'm now responding. We tried legal avenues to head off this project, and those legal challenges have been unsuccessful. We're now dealing with a government that is building this road. We're now dealing with them coming to us and saying, hey, what do you reckon about what we're now planning to put on this site? What do you reckon about the visual impact? What do you reckon about its applicability and relevance to Haberfield? And we're saying we don't like it. We're saying we want to see changes to what is proposed. And that's what the officers are diligently doing. So I don't think it's right to denigrate the work that the officers are doing. They're trying to get a better outcome on WestConnex. We have tried as a council, Ashfield Council tried as a council to get a different outcome on WestConnex. We didn't get it. They've knocked over 200 heritage houses in Haberfield and are building this road and this portal and this smokestack. And we're now trying to deal with that end of the approval cycle. We're not at the stage of fundamentally being able to stop the road project. We try and we get rebuffed. We get legal advice and it says you can't stop it legally. It's not possible, on advice we've received from a very eminent SC, to stop this road. So what we try to do is to manage the impacts for our residents. That's what councils do. That's what Ashfield Council was doing. That's what Leichhardt Council was doing. That's what Marrickville Council was doing. That's what Inner West Council is doing. So I'm sorry, I know you don't like it. We don't like it, but we're dealing with a different stage of the process now, and I'm adopting the recommendations in the council's report. We have sent the submission to Sydney Motorway Corporation, and we will continue to prosecute a better outcome in this part of of West Connect. So, no.
Sorry, you're rambling on.
Well, thank you very much, John. You've had your turn, and I've dealt as best I can with your issues. So,
I will put to you.
no, I'm sorry. You've had your.
A feasible approach.
You won't, because you had your 4 minutes to do that, and you chose rather to make belittling comments rather than substantive comments. So, sorry, no, we've dealt with that item. I've received and noted, and we're forwarding the submission to Sydney Motorway Corporation, and we will do our best to get a better outcome for residents. Thank you.
We're talking about emissions. We're not talking about legal challenges.
No, thank you very much. I am now moving to item 2 on the agenda.
Evidence in a further legal challenge. Yes, that's what you should be doing.
That's what we're doing. We are doing further.
Why didn't you say that then?
I did say that. So
You said that you're going to actually.
thank you very much. We're concluded with that item. I'm moving to item 2, which is the minutes of the meetings of the Implementation Advisory Group and the Local Advisory Committee. And I have got, thank you very much. I've got people who would like to speak on this item. I've got John Stamoulis.
Thank you. I'd like to just quickly open up by congratulating Ku-ring-gai Council on their tremendous win today.
Sorry, John, if you could continue on the item under,
Thank you.
under discussion.
I couldn't go without saying that. Thank you. Yep. Thanks. Look, in regard to the 2 dive sites, I would just like to re-emphasise the minutes of the meeting of the LRAC committee, and that is that we certainly do not support either of those 2 sites. And in fact, I think one thing comes out very strongly is that state government have now merged this council, and the LRAC is a group that now expresses the views of the new council. If state government has merged these councils, then it must listen to the views of its newly merged council, who are saying no to both of those sites. Here is the opportunity for them to listen to us, and will the government do that, or will it override us by listening to department heads? It has a representative body here, and we are saying no, it must listen. It's created us. The other thing that I would like to mention that is pertinent to this issue as well is the announcement last week by the new Premier about the tunnel under the Balmain Peninsula towards the Spit Bridge. I now ask that Council also closely look at this proposal and form some views about its impacts and start letting its community know about this. Thank you.
Yes, Alex.
Thank you, Alex Lofts, former councillor, former deputy mayor. Look, I just want to speak in support of the previous Mr. Stamoulis, the previous speaker. We do have a double duty here. We have opposed WestConnex, and we have done that strenuously, both as Ashfield Council, and we continue our opposition to that. It's a stupid project, and we continue our opposition. Our other duty is to try to ameliorate the dreadful impacts that it will have on our community. And in opposing the dive sites, as we did at the LRAC, we are doing that. So we have a dual responsibility. I would like to see the opponents of the WestConnex succeed. They haven't so far, and I don't know when they will stop it. They keep saying they'll stop it, it keeps rolling on. And so we have this other duty as well to look after our residents, because so far the campaign to stop WestConnex, unfortunately, outside of council, has been pretty ineffective. Unfortunately, despite the great community interest and great energy that people have put in, and I do support them for that, they have excluded people from it by making it not a bipartisan issue. I oppose WestConnex most strenuously. I felt excluded from the federal campaign against the WestConnex because it became partisan. And in doing that, you are excluding a large number of the community who are opposed to it. And I wish you would think about that and try and make your responses a little bit more inclusive and bipartisan. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Does anybody else want to speak on these minutes? No? Okay, so I'm noting these minutes, but I will emphasise that Council has and continues to strenuously oppose both dive sites proposed in the former Leichhardt local government area. In particular, the site next to Leichhardt High School is just balmy on so many grounds. And I'm not sure why the government continues to put forward a proposal which is manifestly unsuitable. But yeah, it was a rhetorical question. Thank you for stating the bleeding obvious. Bleeding's not a swear word, sir. And I do note those two sets of minutes. So thank you for contributions on that item. I will move to item 3, which is the affordable housing policy. I do have a number of speakers on that item. I've got, in order of people who registered, I've got John Stemolis again.
Thank you. Sydney has decided to outpace New York, Singapore, London and Tokyo to be the most expensive city in the world for housing and the least affordable. We've probably achieved this in the fastest pace of any major city ever, certainly in modern times. Go for gold, Sydney. The amount of people being left behind and excluded from the opportunity for housing ownership is probably world-leading now. Treasury have stood by idly and observed great social change, while RBA have made a few mutterings about affordability, but never too much to worry the big end of town. Actually, they are the big end of town. A new office in Blacktown might be good for Treasury, and one in Campbelltown for the RBA. Those two moves alone might produce better outcomes for affordable housing than anything else we might propose here tonight. Look at New South Wales. When the Liberals came to power 6 years ago, first home buyers always averaged between 11 and 13% of housing commitments. This is now below 4%. Unbelievable. Back in 2011, investors were loaned $3 for every $1 to first home buyers. Now investors are given $11 to every $1. That is, in the past 3 years, $200 billion has been loaned to investors, $19 billion to first home buyers. They are locked out of the market. First home buyers in New South Wales are now at the lowest numbers since the late 1980s. One wonders if they can get any lower. When we started out on an affordable housing policy in the Inner West in 2006, it's good to see it now finally come to fruition in 2017, 11 years later. That's a worry in itself. We watched the opportunity to do something substantial go by. Now we will battle hard again to gain any solid wins, but we should try. With escalating Sydney housing prices in Sydney, I fear that in 3 to 5 years' time, this very policy may be overtaken by economics. Therefore, it's essential that Council make this plan resilient and that it looks out to the future so that this doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I have Wendy Hayhurst.
The CEO of the New South Wales Federation of Housing Associations, but also a resident in Petersham. I first of all want to congratulate the council. It may have taken a long time to get an affordable housing policy, but it's good to see one that is so well researched and so well evidenced. And people talk about a housing crisis as if it's almost something that can't be dealt with. I think this policy is something that proves that it could be dealt with. It isn't an unsolvable crisis. I represent around about 50 organisations, a number of them that operate now in the West. And the largest challenge that we face as a sector is access to land. That makes up the largest proportion of construction costs of new affordable housing. So a policy that's got teeth and implemented well is going to make a huge difference. I can see next on the agenda you have an item about domestic and family violence. If you adopt this policy, then it will make a huge difference to those people as well. One of the major reasons that women suffering domestic violence are unable to leave or feel very difficult about leaving is simply because there is nowhere secure and affordable for many of them in the locations that they're living now. There are people who will say that adopting this policy may change the communities they live in. It may require higher densities. That may be the case, but bricks and mortar are only part of the reason for doing this. You really are going to be protecting communities in a different way. I know I couldn't live in Petersham now in the house that I'm living in. I couldn't afford to buy it, and here is me on a really decent income. Bricks and mortar are important, but inclusive communities require you to adopt policies that mean that people who've lived there for generations can continue to live there. And this policy will help contribute to that as well. Before I came here, I spoke to one of our providers who provides affordable housing, and they talked about a woman who's been helped by them, someone in a relationship breakdown who couldn't afford to continue living where they were, couch surfed, ended up in a boarding house where amongst 160 residents, 106 residents, she was one of 3 women. And after a relationship breakdown with domestic violence, that's not where you want to be. Being offered affordable housing made a great deal of difference. She was able to get her children back from her mother in Wollongong as well. So I congratulate you. I hope that one amendment that I've seen to the policy may be reconsidered, and that's the attribution of rental income from affordable housing. And maybe that can go back into a fund to provide further affordable housing as well. Thank you.
John Nicolaides.
Thank you. I'm the CEO of Bridge Housing Limited. We are a community housing provider and a member of the Federation. We provide nearly 1,800 properties through the Sydney metropolitan area, going from the City of Sydney to the City of Parramatta. 20% of our properties are located now within the Inner West, the boundaries of the Inner West LGA. And we're providing accommodation for around about 700 people from very low and moderate incomes. Just to paint a picture, one of the dwellings that we own in the Inner West is a dwelling that's been purposely built for severely disabled children, and quite recently we finished a conversion which provides now some affordable accommodation to 9 older women who were struggling within the private rental market. I won't go into the forces. I think that's been adequately outlined within the affordable housing policy, and I think the previous speaker, John Stamoulis, sort of described at least the framework in which we are dealing with the affordable housing crisis.
I want to commend Inner West's affordable housing policy. I think it's a thoroughly researched document. It outlines a range of mechanisms to try and secure affordable housing, and it does what I think a good local government should be able to do. Now, clearly, local government is not able to deal with affordable housing, but not able to deal with the problem overall. This requires greater both federal and state government intervention in the market. But it's very important that councils, particularly councils that are within significant redevelopment areas, develop policies where they're able to capture, particularly around value capture or around putting in place inclusionary zoning provisions, because not only do we need to deal with housing need now, and the simple indicator is there are 60,000 people on the public housing waiting list, but what will happen in the future? And we know Sydney's population is going to increase by around about 1.6 million, 6 million people over the next 30 years. So we have to deal not only with this generation, but the future generation to come. I think, Inner West Council joins a number of other councils, particularly Waverley Council and Canada Bay Council. And interestingly enough, we manage their affordable housing programs. And it's good to see these interventions in the market.
Another minute?
Yes, thank you. So beyond that, I commend the policy. The only comment I would make on the policy, and this really picks up Wendy's comment, is that the administration of the funds which may be generated through the rent revenue, I think, need to be ring-fenced and used for the provision of future affordable housing. That's what Waverley Council does. Canada Bay has a different policy, but I think that if you're getting extractions via an affordable housing mechanism, then that money should be used to deliver future affordable housing. And probably finish off with and I think it provides a great opportunity for the councils to work with community housing providers. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks very much. I've got Hal Pawson.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I also congratulate the council on the initiative it's taking in this area, because I think we live in a city which has got a very, very limited stock of affordable housing in it, and what that means is that there's a reliance on a very small amount of public and community housing compared with other cities that we would compare ourselves with. So what we have in an area like this is an area which still has some social diversity in it, but it's social diversity that's being very quickly diminished, because the way the housing market works, it strips away that diversity that I think a lot of us actually value. So I think council is proposing to use its power, its what are quite limited powers, but to use them as fully as it possibly can to resist that process, and I think that's something that's highly commendable. The policy that's being proposed, in fact, is not particularly radical or way out one at all. This is something that in the cities that Sydney compares itself with is quite normal practice. New York, London, Paris, these kind of cities, they've been doing this for decades. It's time Sydney caught up, and it's really great to be living in a council where it's leading the charge to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Hal. Eleanor Pridham.
Good evening. My name is Eleanor Pridham. I live in Camperdown and I work as a shift worker, as a registered nurse at a local hospital. I'm also a member and delegate of the New South Wales Nurses and Midwives Association. I'd like to speak in support of this draft affordable housing policy. We welcome any forward progress on this issue. However, I am concerned that the target groups listed in 2.3 of the policy may exclude many nurses. Thanks to overtime and penalty rates, whilst we still have them, nurses' salaries may exceed the financial definition of low to moderate income. However, nurses are still finding it very difficult to find affordable housing in this local area. And that is affordable housing within reasonable proximity to their workplaces. This is of real significance when we think about the impact of working shift work. I have a colleague who lives outside this LGA. In order for him to be at work for a 7 o'clock start, he has to leave home at 4 o'clock in the morning. If he's finished his previous shift at 11 o'clock at night, that is working what we call a late early, he can manage 3 to 4 hours sleep before he has to get up and return to work. Now, this is not good, obviously, for my colleague, nor patently, it's certainly not good for our patients. Another colleague has moved to the Lower Blue Mountains in search of affordable housing. You can imagine our concern for her as she attempts to drive home after night shift. Another thing we know is that public transport doesn't tend to mesh with the needs of shift workers, and many of us would also be familiar with the limited parking options and long wait lists associated with inner city hospitals. Thus, it's vital that nurses can source affordable housing that is in proximity to their workplaces. I think if we don't make efforts to provide this, then we will have problems recruiting and retaining skilled and experienced staff. It will also lead to a greater sense of dislocation where nurses are not members of the communities they serve. And because of the long commutes and shift work, they are also unable to engage in the communities where they live. So I would strongly urge the Council to consider amending that target group area of the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Mary Louise Yeager. I think she may not be here. I called her name anyway, just on the off chance, but not here. I've got Rita Martin.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak at this meeting. I speak along with my colleague Eleanor to support the Affordable Housing Plan and ask that the Council consider an amendment to include shift workers. I'm a registered nurse. I live in the Inner West and have done since I moved to Australia in 1988. I was actually recruited from overseas to come and work in intensive care at Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. I'm married to a teacher. We have teenage children. He teaches in the Inner West. Our children will never be able to leave home but stay in the area that they were brought up in the community that they've lived in. Nurses and midwives are employed in the key industries that every council needs, and many of those are shift workers. There's also a very high density of nursing homes in the Inner West. Aged care is a 24/7 industry, and the shift workers within the aged care sector tend to be not as well remunerated as the public sector, their colleagues in the public sector. And this already, the aged care sector has problems with recruitment and retention of high quality staff, and this is just going to get worse over time. There's nothing I can add to Eleanor's very eloquent case that she's put for the safety of nurses and midwives travelling between late early shifts. They do rotating rosters all the time, and it's for their safety and the quality of care that they're able to deliver to the community, and the safety of travelling on the roads. So I ask you to consider including shift workers in the policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rita. James Gilronan.
Good evening. I support any policies that will work towards improving the state of affordable housing in the area. However, this report has some serious inadequacies. And there's so much to go through that I may struggle to get through it all, but I need to get it out there. The main problem with this report is that in all the many pages, which I doubt most people have read, the report continually speaks about affordable housing, but doesn't really address the main source of affordable housing for people in reality in this area, which is a shared rental accommodation. Shared rental accommodation of properties with 3, 4, or 5 bedrooms are the main source of affordable rental or any form of accommodation for people in the inner west. I don't know whether this is the fault of the consultant who was hired to produce the research used to base this report, or if it is the fault of the language used by the New South Wales government. But the failure to address the true source of affordable housing for people in this area undermines the whole report in many ways. But that said, there's plenty of good things there as well. The bad things, however, continue. Report talks about percentage of affordable housing rather than referring to numbers of people in particular income brackets who will be assisted. So it's very abstract in its goal. The report states clearly that no new real estate product will be affordable for purchase except for people over the median income. Now, we really need to let that sink in. If none of these products are going to be affordable for people under the median income, it's very hard to see how increasing their supply is going to help the people that need affordable housing. Next, the report says that it will increase the number of studios, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. There is an implicit suggestion here that developers would otherwise be producing dwellings with more bedrooms, 3, 4, or perhaps more. Why are we increasing the number of studios, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments when, firstly, they won't be affordable for purchase, except for people over the median income, and they won't be available for rental either, except the small studios, which will be draining people of much of their income. The true source of affordable rental is when people come together and share properties. However, the report doesn't address that. Running out of time, just want to say that the value capture concept is quite revolutionary as far as I'm aware. The report tries to say that it's not a tax, but in truth it is a tax, and it's probably a well-needed one. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, James. Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak on this policy? Alex? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. I also commend the council for developing this policy, and I would like to support previous speakers in their definition of what key workers should be, and I would urge our officers to look at that, to perhaps amend that. I believe in a community that does have social diversity, and I think when I first moved into Summerhill, or into Ashfield and then into Summerhill, we did have a much more diverse community. We had a lot more boarding houses not of the modern sort that developers seem to be really cashing in on, but we had more low-income workers. We had a wide variety of people from different socio-economic backgrounds, and that's a sort of community that I feel much more at home in, rather than what I call a community that seems to be increasingly wealthy, and what I call the Aldi index, which seems to be increasing. Lots more luxury cars and fewer people from low incomes living amongst us. Now, council has done its bit here, I think, in a very detailed way, but truly, as someone has pointed out previously, I think it's really up to the state and federal governments to do their bit in a much bigger way. And by that, I mean that things like negative gearing do need to be looked at, especially for multiple investment properties. We need to look at capital gains tax at a federal level. We also need to look at inclusionary zoning as well at a state level, where, as in other major cities in the world, there is a target for every new development above a certain side of 20 to 30% must be made affordable. The other thing I think we need to urge is that that there's so many empty units that are simply there for investment, and they're new empty units. And I think, as in other major cities in the world, there should be a tax on units or dwellings that stay empty above a certain period of time. Now, I understand that there would have to be some careful thinking about that, because a lot of empty houses, for example, may be those owned by elderly people who are in aged care facilities, for example. I do worry a little bit. I understand this does work through the concept of value capture, which is very good. I am wary at times of voluntary planning agreements, but I understand why they may be necessary to have affordable housing dealt with. It's clearly not, as the federal government would say, simply a matter of supply. It's also a matter of affordability. That people, I would have considered myself a key worker as a teacher. I do not believe that I could buy into this area now. My children or my young adults still at home, not from choice or not because they enjoy it so much. I hope they do, but it's because they cannot afford to live anywhere else as students and as people seeking creative careers. So thank you. No, that's enough. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to this item? In which case I'm going to ask, we have the consultant, Judith Stubbs, who's done excellent work on this policy for council here. We've also got John Atkins, who has done, he's on council staff and has also done brilliant work. So I'm going to ask them initially to respond to some of the technical questions that have been raised. I've got a couple of comments and thoughts myself.
Thank you, Administrator. I would obviously endorse the first few speakers with regard to the dire need in Sydney, but particularly rapidly gentrifying areas like this, where some very low and low income households still have a toehold. When you look at areas like North Sydney and many other markets I work in and council areas that I work in, sometimes the housing stress is very low among very low income households because there are simply none left. And that's not the case here. You have very, very high levels of housing stress and pain amongst your very low and low income renters in particular, as well as moderate income people. So the context here is vital, and that's why people are watching this area tonight to see what the council does. I would like to address several of the very valid points that were made by other speakers who raised issues with the policy. And the first one is Eleanor Predham, who was a very eloquent speaker from the Nurses Union. The issue there is, of course, that nurses are vital to the community. Shift workers are vital to the community. And as a former shift worker, in fact, a bus driver out of Waverley Depot when I was a student, I understand the particular problems that shift workers face when they can't live in the area in which they work. One of the biggest issues, however, in this community, and I certainly support the fact that shift workers will be caught by this policy, but the need to make sure that the policy specifies very low and moderate income households is important for two reasons. One is because there is a statutory definition of affordable housing that council is adopting, and to make it consistent and powerful in regard to its representations to the state government. That's absolutely essential. And the second is that by far, although everyone's suffering in this community from even some high higher income earners are suffering in this community. The absolute priority groups are the very low and the low income renters in the community. They are by far the largest groups in housing stress, and often they're paying not just 60 or 70% of their incomes in their rental, but for someone who is on a very low income pensioner, they will be paying 150% or 160% of their income just to rent a one-bedroom flat. That's clearly not possible. So there is pain amongst moderate income households, and there is pain amongst those who are on even higher incomes, but the pain experienced by those who are on very low and low income households in this area, who are just hanging on by their fingernails and drawing down anything they can to stay here, is massive. So many of the shift workers will be caught by this policy, particularly entry-level workers, people who are casual and part-time, many of the various industrial groups and so on, and so will a lot of nurses. But I think the priority of the policy must remain to be very low and low-income households who are renters. And moderate income who are renters. And unfortunately, in an environment of scarce resources, councils, state government, others must prioritise, and that's what we're looking at here. With regard to the shared rental accommodation, I couldn't agree more. 3, 4, 5-bedroom dwellings are vital to people who are basically on very low income. The only way someone who is on a pension or benefit here, who doesn't own something, could rent anything is to share. Rent affordably is to share. Or to live in a boarding house. So basically that's the only way. So there's no question the policy does not challenge that in any way. That is stock, unfortunately. However, that is going to be lost, much of that stock, through the redevelopment in the areas that we're going to see over the next 2, 5, 10 years. So that stock needs to be replaced with something that is genuinely affordable. That is why the policy focuses on creating rental housing through the value capture mechanism and rented through a community housing provider that is genuinely affordable to very low and low income households and moderate income households. It's a policy that focuses on rental, absolutely. And of course, James, I'm sorry I didn't catch your last name, is absolutely right about the fact that we do point out that nothing for purchase is affordable, and nothing that's being created for rental through the market is affordable. That's why this policy focuses on off-market solutions. It focuses on solutions that are actually capturing value and making or creating genuinely affordable community rental housing. So it's a very important policy in that respect. The only other thing I would address would be one of the final speakers who talked about the need for state and federal interventions. Absolutely correct. But what this policy does is it focuses on the things that state government can do that is most effective. We don't take a scattergun approach in this policy. We try and target in evidence those things that are most likely to make a difference. But the policy also talks about advocating to other levels of government and including the fact that we want to be included in this area under SEP 70, the State Planning Policy 70, which means it's not just voluntary planning agreements, but means there are mandatory contributions, and that's where this should go, and that's a part of the policy. So I hope that I've addressed those issues. That's all the notes I took down. Thank you, Administrator.
Thank you, Judith, very much. So, look, I'm proposing a couple of amendments to the policy, and if you want to, Katerina, make that live. So one addresses the issue that's been raised tonight about shift workers, and that's the second one, which is, sorry, okay. Just bear with us one moment. So if you just flick it up, Katerina, just to deal with the amend clause 2.3.1 at this point in time, not the longer one. So clause 2.3 of the policy identifies the target groups that the policy applies to, which is, as Judith has mentioned, very low and moderate income workers. The issue has been raised with us a number of times by Unions New South Wales and a couple of speakers tonight about the critical role that shift workers play in the employment future and the employment present of the Inner West. So I'm going to amend the policy to add shift workers as an additional target group. I think in large part there you fall within the category of moderate income workers. I appreciate, in some circumstances that you might, through overtime bonuses, tip out of that category. But this policy is very much about ensuring that people don't have to travel 4 hours to work in RPA and the deleterious effect that has on individuals' lives, but also on the patients that they're caring for. So I think it's a very important point, and I'm going to amend the policy as specified in point 3 of the recommendation. The other matter that I'll go to the other matter that was raised about the attribution of rental income to affordable housing rather than into council's general financial plan. I think it's a reasonable point, but I want to do some further investigation of that, and if necessary, come back with an amendment to the policy. We do need to bear in mind that council, and I've got my CFO looking at me now, it has limited funds, and we do need to, we've got all sorts of priorities. Affordable housing is a very critical priority for council, but we have multiple priorities that we have to deal with. So I'm going to take the point that I think both John and Wendy raised. So we'll take that point and we'll do some further work on that, and if necessary, come back with an amendment to the policy, but I just want to understand better the ramifications of a change in that area. But I do appreciate the point you've raised. The other amendment that I'm going to make to the policy is quite long-windedly expressed there, but it needs to be. We have an issue with the draft policy that continued forward into the recommended final policy, where the redevelopment proposals that would have been captured by the policy were those that would only be those that were acquired as in bought, after the date the policy commences. That's, in my view, not satisfactory. We need to target land parcels that have been bought but haven't yet gone through the rezoning process or haven't entered the rezoning process. We would be sterilising a lot of potential rezoning sites if that, I think it was probably unintended wording, but it was well spotted by our eagle-eyed group manager strategic planning and brought to my attention that we need to amend the wording to be very clear that if you're submitting a rezoning proposal to Inner West Council for increased height or density for residential development, after this policy is made, it will be captured by the affordable housing policy. So that's what those words do. They make that change to clause 2.5.2 of the policy. So I'm going to adopt that change as well. It strengthens the policy and makes it unambiguous, which is really important, because people look for ambiguity in policies in order to be able to exploit it. So I'm going to tighten up that provision. And with those two additional amendments, council will adopt the policy. I do really want to thank the staff that have worked on this, and particularly John Atkins and the consultant, Judith Stubbs. They have done a fantastic job. It's very strong evidence-based policy. I think 80% of submissions we received on this policy supported it. It's 4 out of 5, and I think that's testament to the strong evidence base of the policy. So it's a really good piece of work, and I hope will make a significant difference to the housing regime in our area going forward. So I adopt those recommendations, and we now have an official affordable housing policy for the Inner West. So thank you everyone for speaking tonight on that subject. Thank you very much. That moves me to item 4, which is addressing domestic and family violence in the Inner West. It's a funding proposal by council, and as I said previously, we have a lot of very worthy things that we need to fund in the Inner West, and this is one of them. I don't actually have any registered speakers, but I'm happy to take speakers from the floor. Anybody would like to speak on this matter? Sorry, apologies to my many fans on YouTube who wouldn't have heard any of that. That's a flippant comment. And I'll just repeat it. We're now to item 4, which is addressing domestic and family violence in the Inner West. And if we have any speakers, I have none registered. I called for speakers. I don't think there are any. So I'm going to adopt the recommendations in that report and move to item 5, which is council response to the draft Central District Plan put out by the Greater Sydney Commission. And I do have some registered speakers. I've got Frank Breen.
Yes, thank you very much. Frank Breen, former councillor for the Balmain Ward, Leichhardt Council. I was hoping that at this meeting, the papers that were published would be a bit more detailed than what they have been. I saw the same papers that are in the business papers tonight at the LRAC meeting, and it was just a general report. There was no specifics in there about what council's submission is going to be in respect to the district plan of the Greater Sydney Commission. Now, I'm just wondering when that's going to be made available for 2 reasons. One of them is I would have liked to have commented on it before it was actually sent off. And the other thing is I think it would have been very helpful to anybody else who is going to make a submission to get some basic analysis from council about things. Now, they may or may not agree with what council says, but I think it's an important role that council plays in providing information and expert opinion available to the community. So here we are on the 28th of March, and the closing date's the 31st of March. And I'm just wondering if you can tell me when the detailed report is going to be available, and will there be an opportunity for residents to make comments on it before it's sent off? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Frank. We'll answer that in a sec. I have a couple of other speakers. I've got John Stamolis and Michelle Hacking. Is Michelle? Yeah, okay. John and then Michelle.
Thank you. I didn't find the document to be terribly exciting, and I think the plan is more about housing than about creating a productive, livable and sustainable city, about big-time housing development. There's little focus on the true assets of Sydney, on our harbour, our heritage and our natural resources. Our people are left out entirely, but I suppose that's what a planning document ordinarily does. There is no sense that Sydney wants to be an innovator. Discussion on industry in the plan was very flat, and it was not focused on vibrant and diverse local economies, which tend to flourish in cities like New York, Paris, London and others. There is little about arts, entertainment and culture, which are drivers of energy and also drivers of tourism in other global cities. In a sense, I suppose it's typical of what I'd expect from a planning document in Sydney. It's about building apartment blocks. It fails to inform us and excite us. And in a sense, I suppose, it would be good to have a document and a plan which takes us forward rather than reading like a 1980s Sydney, except with more apartment blocks. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Michelle?
Mr. Pearson, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I found Inner West Council's response has fallen into the same trap, which I think was quite cleverly put by the Greater Sydney Commission, that if you use vague language, your responses will be vague. And I really endorse Council's second paragraph in the conclusion that addresses that particular issue. We need details, we need specifics. I think some of the specifics that need to be highlighted, though, are, for instance, the Bays Precinct has been left out of a livable city. If you look at page 35, there are many recommendations about other areas, but the projected number of dwellings for the Bays Precinct, which has an impact in the Inner West Council, haven't been included. There is nothing there. So the infrastructure, the social infrastructure that's needed, isn't going to be included in the residential growth that obviously is going to happen. Incredible residential growth does not make a livable city if you don't have the social infrastructure that is going to support that. And I think our council needs to raise that point. In fact, it's omissions through the document that really worry me. Bays Precinct was omitted. We have a list of places of cultural importance. The Powerhouse Museum at Ultimo is left out. Now, I know that the list can't be exhaustive, but that is one of the tourist venues. It is something that is incredibly important. We have vague statements, but no mandatory regulations for things like transport. If you're going to have thousands and thousands of people come into the area, we need real transport designated. Public transport, yes, thank you. That's what I was thinking. Public transport, we need to think about, for instance, our council looking at the Glebe Island Bridge being reintroduced into the mix so that you have walking and pedestrian access between that part of the Inner West Council and the Sydney City District. We have, if you look at Council's response on page 36, the last paragraph in A Livable City falls for the same problem that we had in the original document from Greater Sydney Commission. We have 6 lines which talk about things like heritage, culture.
Another minute, Michelle?
Please.
Yeah, sure.
We need to be more specific. Rather than a vague statement that environmental heritage, both European and Aboriginal, needs to be enhanced, we need to question what that means. We need to know what is going to be protected and whether guidelines on what already exists and has been protected is all that will be happening in the future. We can't see what is actually meant by any of the language in this document. Statements have been repeated that are too vague, that do not offer anyone a concrete example. We just talked about affordable housing. We need to think about that land in the Bays Precinct. It is government land, it is public land. Therefore, we need components that are sewn into the document and our response to it that look at how we can use some of that land for public good, public benefit.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Would anybody else like to speak? Alex?
Alex Loss, LRAC, and former councillor. Look, I won't repeat what people have said, but I am in agreement with Mr. Stamoulis and was it Michelle who just spoke. I find this document to be vague and very disappointing. There always is a conflict in planning between the need to allow for growth, and Sydney is growing and we will need more dwellings, that is for sure. That sort of strategic planning and taking a community with you. And I don't find what is in this document to be either inclusive or community-based. I don't know why infrastructure, including social infrastructure, creative infrastructure, schools, transport, why those things aren't thought of first and then you plan for growth. It seems to be we plan for growth, lots of dwellings, you know, and then we ignore how they will be sustained, both in terms of the amenity for the community in terms of entertainment, open green space, active space, viable public transport options. We don't seem to be good at doing that. And I cannot see this document actually bringing the community with it in the way that it has not addressed those sort of details. We will, again, I predict, because of this sort of document, have to fight tooth and nail for the LEPs that the former councillors put through, which did go a long way to protect the amenity of our quality residential streets, for example. I can see there will be, and I think the community needs to be aware, we'll have to fight for all of that again in the future. It says it's a livable city, trying to make a livable city, but it's not a document which addresses livability. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I think James Gilronan.
Please give the Cooks River a very high priority, in particular, something which will encourage a cooperation between this council and Canterbury Bankstown Council, given the very high significance of Walleye Creek and the parklands and the edge of Canterbury Bankstown Council, and also given the evident disregard that council has for available green space. And basically, I just want to emphasise the relevance of that waterway to the Inner West, given that the Bays precinct is the other end of Inner West Council and is also very important. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Does anybody else want to speak to this item? John?
Thank you, Mr. Unelected Administrator. You're quite fond of reminding us how you have lack of power to stop WestConnex and how you've done your best. And I say, I think you've basically provided lip service at an inaudible level, in my view. But let's talk about the plan and its three key objectives: productive, livable, and sustainable. And what practical and proactive measures the council could take to deliver on these objectives, and perhaps also address WestConnex. Stop WestConnex. A previous speaker said it hasn't worked for all the effort. Well, it's a darn sight closer than it was if we just put our heads in the sand, I say to him.
More inclusive.
Yet Melbourne and Perth put a halt to their ill-conceived plans. And yes, perhaps these plans were in their infancy. So how do we position ourselves that should the opportunity arise to stop this project, we present an alternate solution other than just filling in the holes? At this very moment, there is an exhibition at the University of New South Wales. It's called Civilising WestConnex. It proposes how we can transport WestConnex into a productive, livable and sustainable solution instead of something born in the 1950s. It proposes to convert the existing tunnels into metro lines servicing the inner city. It proposes to transform the devastated areas into green space, into metro stations, into shopping centres. It proposes to put in place housing, affordable housing plans instead of spaghetti junctions. I doubt you are aware of this, but I urge you if you have any shred of respect for the members of our community, you review the content of this exhibition and formulate a submission based on the objectives of what this is trying to achieve. This was put together by students at the university with minimal resources. It is a very, very comprehensive plan. I'm not telling you that you take it and you adopt it as is, but the thrust of that proposal is mind-blowing. It is basically saying, okay, you've made a balls up of what you're doing, and you've destroyed quite a lot. And the reason why you destroy quite a lot is because, hey, we might as well keep going. We've come this far. Well, this says, how about healing the community? How about looking at what you've done? Stop, one more minute, please. Stopping now and trying to resurrect the city with something that is productive, livable, and sustainable. And full merits to that team who put that together, because it is a viable proposition, an alternative. I know this will not sit well with the people who appointed you to this position. I know it would not sit well with Transurban, but unfortunately, it is a viable proposition. I have already approached the City of Sydney, and I feel confident that they will consider this exhibition and look favourably upon it. It is in line with how they think. What about you? I don't have that confidence, but I'm more than happy to stand corrected. You've criticised the plan. You said it is indirect, it is ambiguous. I agree. Great, a good start. Now get proactive. Instead of telling us what you can't do, instead of giving rambling speeches about how you've tried so hard, how about you put some meat together and put something to say, okay, I know you don't want me here. I know I was unappointed. I know I'm unelected. But here is something of a contribution to the community that I put forward.
Thank you, John.
It's a practical solution instead of rhetoric.
Thank you.
Let's see what you can do about it.
Thank you. So would anybody else like to speak to this item? Anybody else? I'm going to ask Simon Minoski to respond to some of the issues raised.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Look, there's a long list of very good points. We ourselves struggled with the document there in terms of its ambiguity at such a strategic high level that it was written. We were hoping for a document that was clearer and that would support some more of our own local strategic planning. We think it hasn't hit the mark, and we're asking for more information, more details, more statistics, more numbers to back in terms of what they're talking about. And we absolutely will have made that clear in our submission. I apologise, the submission is not in front of you tonight. Our staff are putting the final touches on that submission. We also intend to reflect what's raised at the meeting tonight and import that into the submission as well. I can guarantee we'll be taking all the issues that were raised tonight and reflecting them in the report. The issue that I have is the timing. We've got till the 31st. I can make the report available before that. Mr. Administrator, it will be in the next day or two. Okay. We'll work as hard as we can, as quick as we can, to finalise that submission, taking on board all the issues that were raised tonight. On arts and culture, the very good points were made at the LRAC meeting, and we have strengthened those parts of the report. Also, the submission that we've prepared, and you will see that in the submission when it comes in, when it's released. We have raised the issue of the arts and culture industries and supporting and growing and developing and fostering those industries. They are important. They are critically important to our area. And we're extremely lucky that we do have them. I know for certain there are other areas in Sydney that would love to have what we have. So we do reflect that in a number of different areas in terms of in productivity, but also from a livability perspective. But we need to sustain those industries and help them where we can. In relation to things like base precinct and transport, particularly public transport, yes, again, 100% agree. The report that the district plan itself isn't that detailed on some of these elements. What's happened is the government's actually referred to base precinct is running its own trajectory, so to speak, and there'll be a consultation period that happens with that as details come forth. Same with transport. The government's telling us the long-term transport master plan will be released later this year, and that's the time to comment on in detail on public transport and transport around Sydney. Again, we'll absolutely be looking at that in detail when that comes out. We are responding to the issue, the information that we have in front of us to the best of our ability. We've reflected affordable housing and the policy we're adopting tonight. We're reflecting that in our submission. The Cooks River, again, fantastic point. That's aligning with the comments that were made by LRAC recently in terms of reference to Sydney's beautiful natural resources, harbour, heritage, waterways, parks. That is a critical point. It's part of what they call now the blue grid of Sydney. We are surrounded by water. We need to protect those waterways, the interface with those waterways, and we will be making those comments very clearly. Again, we're dealing with a very high-level strategic document. We want to hone in and for that to be a lot more clearer in terms of what it means for our area. We will be using, we have to use legally, the district plan to inform our local environment plan. So that's the issue there. In terms of civilising West Connex, I'll admit I wasn't aware of that, but that's not to say we won't look at it. And if there are elements we can reflect, or we'll do so. So again, we'll be looking at that overnight and tomorrow morning as well. So I can commit to that.
Thanks, Simon. So we do have a time issue of 31st of March, I think, to make this submission, but we will absolutely make it publicly available on our website, and we'll address all those issues that have been raised tonight. When 31st of March is this Friday, I think. So we will aim to get it out as early as possible. We can obviously make a supplementary submission. I think I spoke to Greater Sydney Commission during last week, and they are obviously going to be moving forward to finalise their district plans, but I think there is certainly still sufficient time to influence the outcome for the Central District, which is our district. So we'll pick up the comments tonight and we'll finalise our submission, and we will make that available on our website. But we do need to lodge it by Friday, and if there are any issues that people are particularly motivated by, that they think our final submission, which will be a much more detailed document than you're reading in front of you tonight, we can certainly make a supplementary submission. We have time to be able to deal with it in that manner. So tonight I'm receiving and noting the report, and we are making a submission. I'll make a slight variation to the second point. We're making a submission based on the contents of this report and issues raised at Council's meeting tonight, the date, Council's meeting of the 28th of March. So thank you everyone for contributing to that item.
Can I ask that we as a community, you as a council, get on the front foot, rather than waiting for these district plans, these master transport documents to come out, and then you tell them what you don't like about them. How about we get on the front foot and we put together our own vision before they put out there?
That is, yeah, that's agreed. That's what we do through strategic plans and through our local environmental plans. And you're right, that's absolutely what we should be doing. We have seconded a staff member to the Greater Sydney Commission to attempt to get some better outcomes through this process. I think that has worked, but we're not there yet. We need obviously to influence the final product. I hope there is grounds to move with the Greater Sydney Commission. At the end of the day, the state government is responsible for state and regional planning, but we need to influence the outcome, and that's what we're going to be seeking to do through our submission. Thank you all for your comments, and that's how we'll deal with it. Item 6, which is a planning proposal for Canterbury Road, Lewisham. I don't actually have any registered speakers for that item. Did anybody want to speak on item 6? In which case I adopt the recommendations in the report. Have also items 7 and 8, which are reports on, and I think here we've got the actual submissions on 2 state government planning issues. One is the draft state SEP on educational establishments, and one is proposed amendments to the EP&A Act, and some solid work by council staff there. I don't actually have any speakers on those items. I do now. Alex Lofts.
I know I've been up and down like a yo-yo, but I won't speak very long on this. I said previously that I think planning systems that include the community and take the community with them at least are much more successful. And I do understand that this SEP is attempting to address an issue that is lack of daycare facilities, and the fact that growth means that we'll need more school facilities as well. And that's something that the district plan, I thought, did not address. And when I did ask the commissioner that question, they said it would involve an intensification of present school sites. And I imagine the SEP on educational facilities is what that is about. It's about intensifying present school sites. The thing that I find a bit worrisome about it is that I think the EP&A Act in its original inception was quite an elegant act. It did include, there was lots of community say, but increasingly it's becoming bloated out with these SEPs, and it's to address issues that probably should have been thought of quite some time ago, and it should be done in a way that's properly integrated, and that's why I had a problem with the Central District Plan as well. Now, under this SEP, a school and everything, look, I'm not going to criticise private education, although I'm a great advocate of public education, having worked in that system for probably 30 years. But I do recognise that it is not an even playing field. And we have had in our area, in former Ashfield area, and I know that we have some very large private education institutions who are now, because of, well, what were Howard government reforms, got large amounts of money. I estimated once that one of our local private educational facilities had a bigger budget than the Ashfield Council, which says something. It had immense resources, able, for example, to buy whole blocks of heritage listed houses and then demolish them. And there's been a continuing tension in the community. And now under this SEP, schools will be able to build a 4-storey, if I'm correct, 4-storey buildings without really having to go to anywhere beyond the SEP. I think that sort of tension in our community will increase because these sort of planning policies do exclude them. And I think the council officers have been right in pointing out that the impact of this will be substantial, and I think we should oppose it, actually. I don't think it's a very good idea. I think that it is a Band-Aid solution, and I'll finish now. It's a Band-Aid solution because of, as I said before, a lack of proper integrated planning.
Alex, anybody else on item 7? Simon, would you like to respond?
I'll respond by saying we agree with the comments that were made, and we've also not supported just openly through complying or through exempt development increases in height, major increases in height on school sites without any consultation or open process.
Thank you. And I've read Council's draft submission. It is a strong submission, and so I'm endorsing the recommendations in the report. Item 7, which is again a council planning submission on amendments to the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. Did anybody want to speak on that? Sorry, item 8. I'm not sure what I called it, but it's item 8. Item 7 I've just dealt with. Item 8 is proposed amendments to the EPA Act. Again, a strong council submission, council staff submission. I think that submission is due shortly. And if there's nobody who wants to speak to that item, I'll also endorse the recommendations in the report. Which brings me to item 9, which is Council's Statement of Vision and Priorities. This has been subject to very significant community consultation. It is in draft final form. We will be, in fact, we've already embarked on the draft community strategic plan for council. So this is a bit of a holding statement of what is the council's vision and what are its priorities. And I do have John Stamoulis to talk on this, and I'll hand over to John.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to commend council on reaching out to the community in this process. I attended a number of the sessions. I think each of the sessions were quite well attended and they were well organised. I don't think there was a lot of new material that was discovered, but I think it was important for the council to engage with the community, especially at a time when the community was wondering what was going on. So I think we achieved 2 purposes there, establishing the vision and the strategic objectives of the council, as well as engaging our community again. So I think the process worked well. In terms of the vision statement itself, I believe that there were some comments there, especially at 3 of the SRGs that I attended, that felt that the word a diverse community, a diverse and inclusive community should be added. That is, that word diverse should be added. And that a number felt that the word passionate possibly wasn't needed in that statement. So I'll leave it for the administrator and others to discuss that now. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anybody else would like to speak on this item? No. John, is that you or Gabby? Who's going to respond on this item? Statement of vision and priorities.
Through the administrator. Thank you for the comments, and certainly I think as the engagement team, that's not the first time they've heard those. I believe that's been taken on board, and particularly with reference to the words diverse community, and noted that the idea to remove passionate has been considered because it can be considered somewhat subjective and may not be appropriate for a vision. So I can certainly note that the engagement team have heard that message from the community. Thank you.
I think the idea, John, was that that we would, through the community strategic plan, and bear in mind this is a holding document, if you like, would prosecute the issue of vision and priorities for council. That's a fundamental part of doing the community strategic plan. So I'm happy with finalising this in the form noted, but I do accept the point that as part of this next consultation that we've started, we're probably going to end up with, slightly or maybe fundamentally different. I'd be surprised if it's fundamentally different, but we probably will end up with something different through the process. But that engagement will lead through to the newly elected council, so that's going to be an opportunity for that newly elected council to put its stamp on the community strategic plan. So I appreciate the point made, but I will now adopt this as a final policy. Final statement of vision and priorities of Inner West Council, and we'll crack on with the community strategic plan process going forward from now. So appreciate your comment, and it's great to finalise that policy, and would like to thank staff, Catherine Ridley and others Gabby and others who've worked very hard on this policy, Prue, I think, as well. Yep, who've worked very hard on it and acknowledge their great work in getting this first position statement for Inner West Council. It is quite a significant achievement, so I do thank them very much for that. Adopted that recommendation, we now move to item 10, which is homelessness policy. Another important initiative of council. Got John again. John and Alex vying for most popular public speaker. John's declining, so Alex is not. So Alex goes one up in the. Yep, over to Alex Lofts.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. This is one of a great many reports of great quality that the council has produced, and I commend staff for that. I won't speak very long on this because I spoke at the LRAC, but I'm pleased to see this policy. I was a volunteer for many years at Exodus, and I probably served thousands of meals to homeless people and others, and that gave me some insight into the issue. And I guess why I commend staff so much on this is that it provides council with a way to approach this issue of homelessness and to approach homeless people with an eye to their human dignity. It's a way of being able to try and resolve the issue without being heavy-handed, and it's a recognition that homeless people are, as I've said before, I should not say therefore, but for the grace of an almighty being go I, but it is possible that any one of us under particular circumstances could end up in a similar situation, whether it's from economic circumstance or illness or whatever. And I know it can be confronting for people to see homeless people in our parks and in other places, and it is confronting even to walk through the city these days to see the number of people who are sleeping rough and of various ages, some very young adult people and some older people. And so I'm really pleased that council and our officers have developed this policy. It's an issue we dealt with a lot, I think, and this provides us with a way of dealing with that with, as I said, with great respect to those who are homeless. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Any other speakers? Okay, I'll ask Gabby to respond to that comment. And I might also say I got a written, Linda Kelly, who's an LRAC member, couldn't attend tonight. She had a specific issue she wanted to raise with the policy that Gabby can also address.
Thank you, Administrator. Thank you for that great feedback, Alex. This is a policy that's been a little while's coming for the Inner West. It's certainly much needed, rather evidenced by the number of rough sleepers that seem to be continually, sadly, growing in our Inner West area. And a lot of that's often due to the case that we've got other service providers in the area that can accommodate for such as the Exodus Foundation that provide daily meals, have now got a dental and GP clinic on site and have had showers for the homeless people. So you often find that they will rough sleep in a near vicinity, so they've got access to those facilities. That being said, Council's been doing a whole range of work, particularly over the last 12 to 18 months, with respect to addressing this issue, and the policy is really testament to the work that's been undertaken taken there and the partnerships that have been formed across the city with the City of Sydney, the Exodus Foundation, Mission Beat, Common Ground and a whole range of others. So we look forward to building on those partnerships as we continue, and testament to the work that's been done by the staff with regard to counting rough sleepers. We've had 3 counts now of an evening to have some true evidence-based information with respect to the numbers we're dealing with. With respect to that, the partnership that's formed, Family and Community Services of New South Wales have actually funded a trial position in the Inner West for a 6-month period to really see if we can address those areas of which there's significant numbers of rough sleepers. So that's credit to the staff and the likes of this policy to ensure that we're addressing the needs where they're much needed. In respect to, as the Administrator mentioned, Linda Kelly had a particular interest with respect to council investigating options that could be accommodated for homeless people in extreme weather conditions. Or weather events, and I'd like to suggest that we can actually incorporate that as an action for staff to further investigate that within the action plan, if that will suffice, Administrator.
Can you propose a brief amendment to that recommendation so that we can ensure that's captured? It's essentially that, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Gabby, is that homeless people in particular suffer from extreme weather. It's a no-brainer. You know, if it's really hot or really cold, they're going to feel it a lot more than we are. So we need to include that as, I think it's called an investigative action in our policy, which means that that's something that we need to have a priority look at going forward as to how we might better address that issue. Climate change affects all of us, but if you're outside in the middle of summer, it affects you a lot more than if you have somewhere to get away from it. So we capture that in an amendment to the policy, which Katerina is typing up now. Thanks, Gabby. I also, with this one, would like to thank Gabby and Sue Pym, I think, who've both done excellent work on this policy. It's sort of generated in the former Ashfield local government area because it is a particular issue that manifests itself in Ashfield, but it's increasingly an issue in Marrickville and also Leichhardt. And I think this policy puts us in a good position to be able to deal more humanely with people who are in that very difficult situation. So made an amendment, if that's up on the screen. The point 2, the council investigate how to address the issue of homeless people in extreme weather events. So we'll make that amendment. I'll adopt that recommendation and thank everyone for their contribution and staff. Thank you. So item 11. We move to item 11, which is proposed name of the new Marrickville Library site. Council has a policy of Aboriginal names for significant new community spaces, and we have one for the new Marrickville Library site, which is under construction at the moment in a very significant site in Marrickville. And this has been considered by the local advisory committee and also by council's, council's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander reference group, who are supportive of the name, which I'm going to get wrong, but it's Patia Garang. John? Close enough. Did anybody want to speak on this item? I have no registered speakers. Yep, terrific. Yeah, it's a very good initiative, and so we will adopt the proposed naming, and so adopt that recommendation. Thank you. Item 12, which is the Traffic Committee, and I think I do have a couple of speakers on this. I've got Brian Crump. Yep.
Thank you. TO 317 item 16, garbage truck access, Oxford Street, Newtown. There is a safety issue which I think has been overlooked in the traffic report. The location is Oxford and St Mary's Streets in Newtown, which meet at 90 degrees. However, 6 metres into Oxford Street from that intersection, Oxford Street curves to the right to run parallel with St Mary's Street. Oxford Street begins at approximately 7 metres wide at the intersection. As it curves at the apex, it then narrows down to 6 metres. And it's that curve which is the site of the current issue. I've lived in 62 Oxford Street, Newtown since 1992, and that residence is situated on the curve. 62 Oxford Street faces both the south and the west side of Oxford Street because it's an old corner shop which we've renovated. During that time, I've observed an excessive number of accidents. The vehicle owned by the resident who has a major issue here at 45 Oxford Street has been hit on 3 or 4 occasions when parked on the eastern side of Oxford Street. We're talking about 2 types of accidents. Accidents involving vehicles, particularly delivery vehicles and the garbage trucks driving down Oxford Street, hitting parked vehicles as the driver negotiates the curve in Oxford Street. Secondly, accidents between vehicles entering Oxford Street from Oxford Street and St Mary's Street intersection and vehicles already driving down Oxford Street towards that intersection. On 3 separate occasions, my car parked in Oxford Street has been hit by other cars and other residents report similar experiences. There are basically 2 problems associated with this. One, drivers entering Oxford Street from Gilpin or St Mary's Street can't see if there's already traffic in the street until they're about 30 metres into the street. At this point, the road narrows. There needs to be sufficient room for the vehicle entering Oxford Street to then reverse back to allow room for the other vehicle to pass, and that's a very difficult manoeuvre if cars are parked on both sides of the road. Secondly, the garbage truck does need sufficient room to enter and negotiate the curve out of Oxford Street and to reverse into Oxford Street, as it often has to do. The same applies to delivery vehicles. I propose a no standing any time sign be installed on the south side of Oxford Street, running from about 8 metres from the crossover entry into 62 Oxford Street to the Oxford Street St Mary's intersection. It would ensure sufficient space to get around both of those problems. Significantly, no one actually parks on the south and west side of the curve in Oxford Street, as all vehicles that I've seen do so since 1992 have been damaged. Can I have 30 seconds more?
A minute,
Yep. Significantly, the residents of 64 Oxford Street do not park outside their house for the same reason, and that's been a clear pattern since 1992. There is a proposal from the committee that there be a 12-metre no parking restriction only at garbage collection times. I don't believe it addresses the issue. I think we need the installation of a no standing sign at any time, because really what we need to do is to take into account the safety within that area. I've put a couple of photographs in. I'm happy to submit those. They make sense of what I'm talking about, but that's basically the essence of it. I think the council officers have done a good job. They probably haven't appreciated that the road narrows from 7 to 6 metres, that their solution won't solve the problem, but a no standing sign where people don't park anyway, with the exception of 1 car space, would be lost, will solve the problem for the garbage truck and for the safety of the residents. So how would I go about submitting those photos?
You can table them with, probably best to table them with Wal Petchler, who's the relevant group manager, and who I will, Brian, get to respond now to the issues you've raised. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, Minister, I think the only change that's being requested is that it become a full-time no parking zone rather than just the no parking for the garbage vehicles. The only reason the officers didn't recommend a full-time zone, they were concerned about loss of parking in the street where there's high demand, but I'm happy for the recommendation to be changed to full-time no parking.
Thank you for that. Well, we're happy. I'm happy to make that change. So your advocacy has been successful. So, and thanks for that response, Wal. I have a second speaker. It's not always so easy, but I've got a second speaker, which is Georgia McIntosh. And this is definitely not Georgia, but
Clearly, I'm not Georgia McIntosh, as you said. My name is Grant Flanagan from EG Funds Management. I want to talk on the roundabout at the corner of Smith and Edward Street in Summerhill. I do thank...
Which item is it, Grant?
Sorry, it's item 2.
Item 2, thanks.
So I do thank the council officers for their report recommending the approval for the design of the roundabout. I just want to make a couple of statements about how we've gotten to this point. We have negotiated widely with the community. The roundabout design has been on public display on 2 occasions, and the community has had the opportunity to respond to it, and the design has been modified in response to the community concerns. There was a comment made, I think, by Alex at the last council meeting regarding a resident concern about the Armco barrier that was on the corner of, quite close to her house, on the corner of Smith and Edward Street. We have modified the design as requested by the resident, and included a planter in that area to minimise the impact of the pedestrian guardrail. So I do thank the Traffic Committee and the council officers for their support for this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Wal, do you need to say anything on that? Or we accept that that's a good outcome, and I appreciate your comments. Mr. Flanagan, thank you very much. Okay, well, I need to adopt the, sorry? Oh, sorry, I have got another speaker. So if you could, I know you've spoken before, but...
Michelle Hacking. I'm from Rozelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'd like to ask a question more about item 6.H. Item 6, it's wonderful. The community really celebrates Anzac Day at Balmain, the first memorial, we think, in Australia. If you go down to point H, though, I'm concerned that STA buses terminate all services either at Grove Street or in Mullen Street. Mullen Street works, but Grove Street is back in Lilyfield. And many of the people who attend an Anzac Day service may be coming by train and therefore on the 4:45 bus. If it terminates at Grove Street, they have a long way down Darling Street to have to negotiate. Somehow, it's not a walkable distance for the majority of people who would be attending that particular service. Now, I know STA must have had a good reason for recommending Grove Street, but I would suggest that all buses should come down at least to Victoria Road, and even that is a long distance for elderly people. Mullen Street, corner of Montague and Darling would be much more usable and much more friendly for the people who are attending.
Thank you for that. I'll ask Wal Petchler to respond.
Chair, I'd need to get advice from the STA on that issue. I'm not too so sure.
Do we think that's something that's been imposed in previous years, or you're not sure?
I'm not certain.
So I think what we'll do on that, Michelle, is we will discuss it with STA and get a response from them. And if necessary, if it is an issue, we'll amend the provision. But we'll get some advice on that. So thanks for raising that. Mr. Petchler will follow that up on the morning. Yeah, thank you. Any other speakers? No. In that case, I receive and adopt the recommendations of the Traffic Committee with the one exception, which was item 16 that Wal has. We've made a change to that to make it a no standing any time sign. And we're going to follow up the issue in relation to the Anzac Day ceremony bus issue. Move to item 13, which is the financial report. I have John Stamoulis.
Mr. Administrator, it looks as though most people know what I'm going to say. I haven't even started yet. Look, I'll make a similar offer again that if council wish to use my resources to assist in providing a good summary document about its financial investments, that would be good. I offered my services for free, but maybe that's far too cheap, so I'll do it at KPMG rates. Even though we know the quality of some of their reports, I assure you our quality will be good. But I think it's very important, I would hope before the end of this term of administration, that we do consider producing a standard range of reporting data, financials being one, DA reporting being another, and some of these I assisted Leichhardt Council with, and we got some very good, neat summaries for councillors and for staff. And I also feel firmly that, you know, there's some strong messages there for council in terms of protection of council having good information. You know that I'm a statistician of 33 years, and we design our documents very carefully for protection of council itself. Thanks.
Thank you, John. I'll ask Michael to respond to that. The CFO.
Through the Administrator. Thank you, John. No, I know you've offered your services kindly. We've actually been looking at the reports that Leichhardt Council have previously put together as part of our process of looking through investments and putting up an investment policy that I'm hoping to get to the April LRAC first before we go to Council. Part of that will be looking at what sort of reports and some of the graphs that you had previously in Leichhardt built, putting them into a document which our investment advisors can constantly report on. And I think I remember some of them around quality of credit, quality of the term deposits that we've invested in, the yield that we've been receiving over a period of time, and so on. So I'm building those into our future reporting.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody else on Frank Breen?
Yes, thank you. I'm looking at page 349 of the business papers, which is the environmental commitments and the non-fossil fuel percentage. And I was surprised to see that the total from January was 57% and the total for the end of February is 55%. So I'm just wondering why we've gone backwards when our policy is to actually go the other way. And also, could I suggest that comments as to why it's gone backwards would have been helpful if it would have been included in the report. Then I would maybe not have to ask this question, but so I'd appreciate clarification of that. And if it is going backwards, what we're planning to do to try and arrest that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. I'll ask Michael to respond again.
Through the Administrator. Thank you, Frank. Again, we will be looking at our report. It's a good comment. I will make sure that our investment advisors include a reason as to why our fossil fuel-free investments may be moving backwards. But as we've discussed previously, the core crux of our investment policy is about capital preservation. Our investments are based on keeping our credit, the quality of our investments. And 98% of our investments, I think we've got in there, are A2 or above rated. When we move to fossil fuel-free investments, the ratings generally move down to about BBB, which is adequate as opposed to very strong. Given that our policy is largely capital preservation, we generally will choose to make sure that the quality of our investment is maintained as opposed to decreasing the quality of investment to move to a fossil fuel-free. However, we will come up with a program of looking at whether we could increase that.
Thanks, Michael. Any other comments? I support Frank's comment about the need to be very vigilant about our non-fossil fuel portfolio, and we have discussed this before. We'll never get to 100% because of the classification, the the ratings that we need to preserve in our investment mix. But I want us to be able to get to the best we can achieve under a prudent council financial investment regime. And I think we can do better than we're doing at the moment. We can absolutely do better. So it's an area I would like to see a strengthened in reports going forward in relation to that item, and a vigilance from council to do the best it can in that area. So I am going to receive and note the report as indicated by the recommendation. Thank Frank and John for their comments. So next I'm going to deal with, I've got two items that need to be dealt with confidentially. One is item 14 in relation to extending the swimming season at Fanny Durack Aquatic Centre, and the other is item, sorry, the other confidential item is item 16 in relation to procurement of asset management consultancy services for council. So they have to be dealt with in closed session. So what I'll do now is bring forward item 15, which is an administrator's minute on Marrickville Public School fee assistance, where council is proposing to provide $1,000 to Marrickville Public School to assist them with a very worthy $100,000 project that they have been successful. I think it's a national competition that they were successful in achieving to redesign a space in the schoolyard, and I think it's only reasonable that council tips in to up to $1,000 to assist with tipping fees for that project. So did anybody want to speak on that item? No, so I'm going to move and adopt that motion. It's item 15. We also have item 17, I think it is. Item 17, which relates to today's announcement. I'm sorry, I need to just find the relevant paper. Item 17, which is an administrator's minute on the Parramatta Road public transport system, which we did a very strong advocacy piece on today. Hopefully people might have picked up on that at some time today, where council is taking the lead to attempt to get a better public transport solution for Parramatta Road. The government has put out a revitalisation strategy for Parramatta Road, which proposes 50,000 new jobs and 27,000 new homes on Parramatta Road, but it doesn't have a coherent, or it doesn't have a cogent public transport solution. Inner West Council has done some work with Canada Bay Council and come up with a recommended centre-running guided electric transit system for Parramatta Road between Strathfield and the CBD. This is a really good piece of work that's been done by consultants for council and overseen by Ken Welsh and the transport people in council. Very ably overseen. It's a really strong piece of work. We've got very good coverage today. We've got a cautiously positive comment from the Transport Minister, and we will use that going forward to try to get this outcome for Parramatta Road. What council's proposing through this minute is to joint fund the next step, which is a preliminary feasibility study. It'll cost $150,000 to $160,000. Council will offer to put in up to $80,000 towards the initiative. Does anybody want to speak to this item? Alex Lofts.
Promise this is the last one. Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Alex Lofts, LRAC and former councillor. I did speak to two former mayors today about this. That was Ms. McKenna and Mr. Burns, and they were really excited about it, as I am. I think this is an example of council really getting on the front foot. It's a really innovative proposal, and from my reading, this system has great advantages over light rail in that context, and the RBS, a rapid bus system as well. And it's a great benefit if we can get, if we've got Canada Bay on side and other councils, if we can get them on side. I don't know if there are other relevant councils, really. Sydney Council? Not really. Good. And it is something that I think the West Council now, and I can only speak about Ashfield Council. I know other councils did take up strong initiatives like this, but I remember my first speech to council was about getting the light rail system from Sydney to Dulwich Hill, and when we worked with Eco Transit, as it was called, to lobby for that. And we kept at it, we kept recommending it, and as you know, even more recently in LRAC, we've recommended light rail, but I think this, obviously, from my reading of the report, has some advantages over light rail in the context of Parramatta Road. There will be, to get light rail, and we did have opposition, I must say, from other councillors. They were entrenched in their view that it was going to be, light rail would be a toy, as I was told once, that it wouldn't work, no one's going to use it, it'll take too long. And you look at it now and it's probably overcrowded, actually. It's been incredibly accepted by the public, and I really do think this system will be too. It took, in that case, it did take getting local members Linda Byrne and Carmel Tebbit on side, and before the advent of the Farrell government, that light rail project, for example, had started, and to a credit, the then Transport Minister Gladys Berejiklian took it up, and now we have it. And I just use that as an example because this is a really credible and innovative technology that's being proposed here. And I think it's called disruptive, isn't it? Isn't that the term? Disruptive technology to some extent. And in being so, there will be some entrenched positions that I would think we would need to overcome, just as with the light rail, is mainly a bus sort of lobby that was trying to prevent that happening, and we had to convince people, we had to convince local members and transport ministers, etc., that no, it will work. And I think we may have that sort of battle here too. I mean, there's another proposal for a rapid bus system, which from my reading, I don't think that would be as good or as effective, but there will be, I would think, a fairly strong lobby for that, just because there are particular philosophies of transport, and this is so new. So once again, I commend council on this. I know that you've copped some criticism from other quarters tonight, but I commend this report, and I think it's a great initiative, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Anybody else on this item? So thank you for that. Okay, I'm sure that wasn't 3 minutes. And anyway, it doesn't apply. So what I'm doing here is I've already written to the Transport Minister and the Planning Minister, providing copies of the report and advocating for this centre running guided electric transit system. We're going to offer to fund up to $80,000 towards the joint feasibility study. That's recommendation 2. And thirdly, I am going to ask other councils to chip into the $80,000. So see how we go on that. We did get Canada Bay to contribute to the study. So I'm hopeful we might also be able to defray some of the cost of our $80,000. But I think it is very important for us to put our money where our mouth is on this as well, and say we want to partner in delivering this great new public transport system for Parramatta Road. So I'll adopt those recommendations and thank people for their interest in that item. And also particularly thank Ken Welsh and the media team at Council who've done a great job today. So thank you to all. They're the item. I think we've got 2 items to deal with in closed session. So I would ask if people could. Yeah, did anybody have comments on those items, the reports that you've seen, the Fanny Durack item, which is item 14? Wish us good luck. You get me the first into the pool, Morris. And the other item is item 16. Anybody on that? No? Okay, well, thank you very much all for your attendance, and see you next time, if not before. Thank you all.